let's go ahead and get started. I know that both Mo and Philip are extremely busy people, and we're it's such a privilege to build a sense of community and have folks like Mo and Philip just contribute to the learning. Many of you know the Grab app. It is my literally most used app because I eat a lot and I go to a lot of places. I think I was one of the first few people who downloaded it in the Philippines. I was addicted. It actually made me like it convinced me that tech could thrive in Southeast Asia when I first moved to the Philippines. But Philipp Kandal is the chief product officer. He's responsible for transforming a number of the experiences that you interface with on the Grab app. I met him when he was still on one division. Now he's in charge of the whole product organization. And Philip's influence isn't just at Grab. He's actually built the largest, with a number of folks like Vlad, the largest tech community in Eastern Europe, which is Techsylvania. He's still the chairman there. He's also the MC interrogator for the whole thing. And it's probably one he's also built like a center of excellence for tech in Eastern Europe. Philip's an angel investor. He mentors. He's very generous with his very limited time. But I think just a few words from Philip and advice really it's transformative. Both not just the encouragement, but the insight on how to think through a problem and how to execute on it is very few. I've seen him in action. I've been a recipient for much of his mentorship and advice, and I think it's just phenomenal that he's here.
You're way too kind, Dexter.
Oh, I'm sure I'm not. I think everyone, everyone who's had the privilege of talking to you would say exactly the same. Mo, like I think, so Philip has probably built and oversees one of the most used apps in Southeast Asia. Mo probably launched one of the most used features in the whole globe. He was the product manager and visionary leader who was behind the launch of Siri. He actually joined the Siri team when it was still the Stanford, I don't like saying the name, Stanford Institute for Research. And he joined it through the acquisition by Apple from Siri. I also share in common with Mo that we're both on deck, and he currently is getting his next AI-powered product and company off the ground. It's DesignPro, which is shaping how designers can manage their tasks from video, Figma comments, and from chat. So he's had 2 cracks at the apple and a lot of experience in between. So we're really looking forward to just hearing from both Philip and Mo how they look at and adapt to and attack user problems using AI as a solution. I'm Dexter. I'm Swarm's CEO. Swarm's actually my second company. My first had its breakaway when we actually implemented features that personalized job search using AI. And we had to build an AI team way back when, literally in 2015, in Southeast Asia, with a team that literally taught ourselves the machine learning techniques. We built our own fundamental models. We launched it, and when it didn't work in production, we had to figure out how to, like, what ML ops really took to make it work. And I could show you all the scars on my back trying to think through how to get something into production that solves user problems. Where I'd love to start the discussion is really on that. It's like on the problem statement. I think AI right now, a lot of people are chasing it because it's an investment trend, because it's top of mind. It's in the headlines every day for good or for worse with the drama that's recently happening. Mo, I'd love to kind of start with you, like in the olden days, like when you were thinking through what problem NLP, natural language processing, could solve. Like, can you take us back to the early days of Siri and how you thought through the problem statement and validated it? And, like, what did you do? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, so actually, the start of Siri goes way back to the 1990s, when Adam Cheyer interacted with Douglas Engelbart, who produced this what is now known as the mother of all videos, of an assistant. And that assistant, helped, write your articles. It actually did video. He created this amazing video that really captured the vision and the, imagination of a digital assistant. So naturally, Adam Cheyer, was inspired by this, and the idea of Siri actually was born in the 1990s. Now, there wasn't that AI, technology, the NLP back then, but that's where the vision of an assistant, came about. And if we actually fast forward, a couple of decades to 2007, Adam actually, found himself by that point creating 50 versions of an assistant by then. And every version was almost a different type of product, a different problem statement. But the one in 2007 was special because it came about when there was two inflection points in our industry. The first is a technology inflection point, and that was when NLP got to a level that it was mature enough that a mass market, use case of someone speaking English or typing in English, the system could understand it to a reasonable degree of accuracy and consistency. So that was the first inflection. The second inflection that happened was the iPhone. It was the adoption inflection of that. And so Adam's vision of the assistant, though it had been for many years, took on a new vision of a ambient assistant that you could just speak to, in plain English. So you can speak to a computer system. And this system didn't have to have a screen. It could be ambient. It could be your phone. It could be your laptop, but it could be your car, or it could be your home. So the start of Siri really, at least the Siri that we know, started with this vision. And from that vision, then, we learned many things. We learned, for example, when we created actually the first iteration, which was the iteration before the Apple version, we created this little app on the iPhone. We learned that actually it was more of like a remote control for your life, in that it actually helped you do things. So we described it as a do engine, which is countering the positioning of Google, which is a search engine. So Doug, the CEO, actually made a graphic of a Time magazine of Siri pushing away Google. And he used that as his narrative when, attracting investment. And he didn't have a hard time attracting investment, with that type of vision. But the more we got into it, the more granular we had to think about how to execute this vision. And one of the things I can just share is that we started thinking of Siri as the assistant that you use during the weekend. So Google you use during the week because you're at your desk, right? And you're in front of a computer. But on the weekend, you're out and about. You're with your phone. And what are you doing with your phone? You're checking movie times. You're checking events. If you guys remember Ticketmaster, I don't know if anyone has used it, but that was one of the first integrations. We integrated with Yelp and OpenTable, which was or still is a restaurant booking software. So these are the things that you do on your phone, a do engine. And that was then laying the foundation of our roadmap and what actual use cases, we ended up delivering.
When you actually were trying to validate, like, okay, the experience of using an assistant that you could talk to, right? What was the alternative? It was the alternative to search. Is that what it was? So it was, instead of having to have the intent Interesting. And how did you know that was compelling, but
Well,
against what Google's offering?
Yeah, so it started with a vision in this case. So it started with a big bet that people want to talk to their phone. It was an assumption and it wasn't really tested, but it captured our imagination. And I can share like a quick example. I was testing Siri. It was one of the early prototypes, and we we were going out. I was out with my friends, at a bar, and we were all trying to decide on which movie, to go to. So I whipped out Siri and I started talking, to Siri. And by the time Siri gave me an answer, back then Siri was pretty slow. Actually, the group had already decided, and so this was one learning where Siri had to be really fast and it had to, like deliver results in a way as if I'm talking to my friends at that kind of speed, because it wasn't me sitting at a desk where I have all the time in the world. It was out and about when you have very little time. So that was just one example where it informed then our roadmap that we need to invest in something that's super fast. And that's what then led us to convert to being a native app. So before we were actually a website, right? But then it made us build a native app, which then also eventually led to the home button, on the phone. So it has to be super accessible, super fast, because you're out in the world interacting with other people and doing things. And that was the context that it had to really run in. Yeah.
Got it. When I'm with my family and we're deciding what to have for dinner, I don't. That's a long conversation.
Yeah, so Siri probably has a chance to help you out in
2007. Yes, Siri could outrun us. Philipp, you were a part of the technology transformation at Grab. I think that making technology as a value proposition in and of itself is a key differentiator. And I was an early user of Grab, and I'm still a daily user today, and just saw overnight when you and Mark started to really transform the organization. And so you really were there when the organization was thinking through its product strategy, and you're a part of that decision to think about what the early use cases for AI were in Grab. So for Grab, did the problem statement come first, or did the bet come first? And how did that kind of evolve into like the first use case where you applied AI?
I mean, AI has been around at Grab for a long, long time, right? Like a lot of the stuff. But I think for many of our areas, what we have realized, right? Like, I mean, as a technologist, it's always very easy to go technology first and then find a use case where it's needed. But like, so that comes natural to many of us. But I think where I've seen it really transformative and impactful is when going from the problem first, right? Like that's when we've always seen that it really like drives impact, right? Like, so we've like what we're really obsessed about at Grab is saying like, how do we get like to the level of like how can we, like, for example, if we look at our transport, how can we make it like as reliable as like the Japanese railroad system as an example, right? Like, and I think things like that are very hard problems, right? Like, I mean, Southeast Asia as an ecosystem, right? Like there's still many disruptions that are beyond our control. And that's where like AI technology can really shine, right? Like, so what I've seen over and over, the beauty of AI versus traditional engineering is the ability to learn and react very, very quickly, right? Like, and that's where the real world is like very messy, right? Like something like what I mean, a lot of my original background is in maps, right? Like, so you see that like somewhere in Southeast Asia, some road gets closed because somebody decides to have their wedding party there, and then that road is closed, right? Like, so your system needs to learn to route all your drivers around that. Somebody decides to open like a new restaurant, so we need to learn about it and like make sure that it's available for people to order from that, right? Like, so I think that's really where we see the looking from the problem, how's the real world changing, and how can we learn as quickly as possible about these changes and make these like find solutions, right? Like, I mean, that's the beauty of human intelligence, right? Like, I can like drop you in the middle of a city that you've never experienced before and like say like, hey, find your way to the airport, and you'll make it happen, right? Like, and that's the reason. It's not because you have a fixed programming that says that's a 27 steps I do to that, but that's because you're human and you have intelligence. And now systems like AI approach that. So that's kind of like the beauty of AI systems are able to react to the real world, and that's kind of like what we've really seen with our mapping efforts and with many of our other efforts.
So that's really interesting through line between Grab and Siri is this the need to learn and react quickly. That reaction speed is a core kind of attribute for when AI is important. Uh, Philipp, could you like what was it in Maps when you realized like was there ever a use case where the problem presented itself and it was evident that AI was the only way to actually solve that problem? I'd love to hear just kind of that use case and that thought process and how you evaluated it.
Oh yeah, I mean 100%, right? Like I mean, maps are just like built for like being powered by AI, right? Like computer vision, like interpreting these images, right? Like so the way to think about it, right? Like Southeast Asia has several million kilometers of road network, and when you want to transform them in digital maps, there's two ways to do that, right? Like so the first of all, you generate a bunch of images, right? Like you send people out recording that. And then you can either have a human look at it and build a map out of it, or you can have an AI system look at it. So in this case, right, like the example that I gave, a bunch of millions of kilometers, if you have humans, you probably need like tens of thousands of people for a bunch of years to do that, right? Like, so that is completely cost prohibitive. But AI really has for this, especially like, right, like now it's getting more and more flexible, but especially like earlier and more basic AI systems, they're really good at repetitive tasks. And this is like map a bunch of millions of kilometers, interpret these images, look where it's legal to drive, where it's not legal to drive. AI enabled us something that in the past we could have never done at like reasonable cost, right? Like, so I think that is like one of these things where we've seen, yeah, you can do it without AI, but it's going to cost you a fortune. And with AI now, finally, you can do that, right? Like, and I think this is like what I'm a very firm believer on is especially the more latest AI systems. They're basically providing you like intelligence as a service, right? Like so now, and that scales really well, right? Like so that's what we've seen that like a lot of our computer vision tasks we could have done without AI systems, but they would have been 10 or 100 times more expensive.
So got it. And that computer vision's like a clear cut use case there. It's very interesting. So like both of like now that a number of services are available, APIs for AI intelligence and processing information, being able to even do embeddings APIs. Everyone like for founders who are building AI powered tooling or AI native startups, they're building on top of services that are now available to everyone, right? And I'd love to hear about like, both of you as product leaders, how you think about building a defensible or unique business, whether if it's from a problem statement point of view or a strategy point of view, especially when AI is no longer a differentiator. It's commodified now. It's literally commodified. So I'd love, and I know that both of you have like kind of thought through this. But Mo, like, what are your thoughts? How, like, now that you're building DesignPro, how do you think about this kind of defensibility question?
Yeah. When we look at the more technical side of defensibility, I think many folks have spoken about getting more data, right? You get more data, you can train your models better, you get higher accuracy. This, AI is based on a probabilistic, non-deterministic approach. It's not an algorithm based. And so the more data you have, the better your results. But what does that mean for a founder? How do you get more data? And I was actually speaking to my Siri colleague about this, and we came up with a very simple approach, which is more data just means get more users, get more people using your product. Get your product in the hands of more people, get them coming back, build a great product, right? And if you think about it, product A that has 1 million users versus product B that has 1,000 users, which product has the opportunity to build AI that's going to be better than the next guy? And so that's how we're thinking about it, in DesignPro, is build a great product that has more users that keep coming back. And in the case of DesignPro, someone adds a Figma file, right, for us to synthesize into tasks, or Slack, or their designs. So the more people that join us and the more people that come back, the more data, the more we have to work with to train. So that's one approach. The other is along the lines of refinement learning. Some of you may have heard or has seen some of the AI products that have a thumbs up and a thumbs down, right? And that's, I would say, the basic approach to getting feedback on whether the AI result, whatever that is, it could be content, in our case it's tasks, was good or was not good from the perspective of the user. I actually think we can take it a step further. And the way we're doing it is by looking at actual actions that the user takes on the generated result. In our case, the generated result is a task. And so the user can edit the task if that task was not generated in a perfect way. And so by looking at the edited response, now that is even more helpful feedback to go back into our system to say, you generated, this task, but actually what the user wanted was this task. So that's one action. Another action could be if the user deleted the task. That means we generated a task that wasn't, as relevant or useful. A third action is if a user completes the task. So, okay, that's great. So they took your task that you generated and you completed it. So I would encourage founders to think about on the actions that a user can take on the generated content and use that as the signal, for feedback.
And I think you reminded me of what our exercise was in my previous company, where we were personalizing job search. Like we had to actually build our own LLM fundamental model to generate recommendations. Recommendations were not off the shelf in 2015, and we, when we're personalizing job search, we would provide recommendations, and whether or not those recommendations were taken and resulted in an application, that was a feedback loop. And on the other end, whether or not the recruiter would accept that application and invite them in for an interview was another feedback loop on intent. So I think kind of extracting your model about getting these feedback loops, these actions on generated results, it's thinking through, well, what is the value that you think you're creating in that interaction, and seeing if making sure you capture that that feedback event as data, so that way you can create either further personalization, or even as a feedback loop for the model, the underlying model itself.
Yeah, I like to think of it as having a conversation with your customer, because you're dealing with a non-deterministic technology. So it's not like this is the result, take it or leave it. No, this is my suggestion to you. Now help me improve it or make some customizations. I think this is why the model of assisting humans, and getting them to then use your suggestion, but then they actually make the final decision can help. Yeah.
Philipp, I think there's knowing kind of what you all had done at Grab. I'd love to hear kind of how, and even kind of you've even created your own geo solution, and with the intent of getting feedback from your users. Can you talk through defensibility from your point of view? What are some of the things that you think a founder or somebody who's trying to build or launch a product needs to think through in this era of commodified AI?
Yeah. So I think it's a really, really, really good discussion. And I think on top of the things that Mo said, right, like, which I think are tremendously important, getting users, getting data, and building on top of that, that's given. The other thing that I want to double click on is also it's really important to specialize and be really good in a domain and be an expert, right? Like what we see goes away relatively easily is this very thin layers that try to do something very generic, right? Like there's a bunch of people that have built just a super thin layer on top of like build a bot on top of OpenAI, and then OpenAI launches like a bot engine, and then everybody's like, oh damn, that has gone away, right? Like so a lot of these like very thin layer things go away, but what works very well is like things like what Mo is doing, like go in the design domain, right? Like is like OpenAI or Google are not going to launch like a design AI specialized solution, right? Like that's just not what they would do, right? Like or somebody launches like a specialized solution for support or for whatever, right? Like I think that's where really for a lot of founders, like by just being really a deep expert in a solution, and AI is a part of it, right? Like the one example I like to give people always is like in the early days there used to be something like a chief electricity officer, right? And that sounds completely ridiculous now, right? Like, I mean, every company uses electricity. Is you don't have like a C-suite position for chief electricity officer nowadays because it's embedded in everything. And I think for me, the same thing is with AI, right? Like, so right now, and I hope no chief AI officer is offended of that, but basically, I think it's going to be so embedded and natural that that basically anybody will play that role, right? Like so, and coming back to the question, right? Like what have we learned when we built maps, right? Like we have learned in the beginning that our customers in Southeast Asia have very particular problems with maps that we can solve with AI and other solutions, right? Like so, we've learned, for example, that in food delivery or in transport, it's very important that we get you right to your doorstep, right? Like, so we say when we do food delivery, we do delivery like kitchen to couch, right? Like, and we don't quite literally bring it to your couch. We typically stop at the front of your door, but that's what is very important, right? Like in a traditional map, when you search a building, then it would say, hey, here's like this big skyscraper. The dot is in the middle of the building. But in reality, that's not how it works, right? Like if you want to deliver food, then the driver has to get into one door, has to take an elevator and take it up to your floor, right? Like so this is things where AI can help and can say like, hey, food delivery drivers have to use the back entrance because they're only allowed to use the service entrance. So we route the driver not to the middle of the building, which he can't physically go, obviously. We route him to the right entrance, and AI can detect where that entrance is. AI can tell him like, here's like the elevator, go up, drop it to that door, and that's it, right? Like, and that way the driver can save precious seconds so that he can take on the next food delivery, right? Like, so, and the way why AI helps you over a very generic solution, it helps because you deeply understand the domain, right? Like, and Grab understands, I think, transport, food delivery, some of the financial services which we do, and we start with like, what is the problem, and then we really design a solution. And AI is an important part of it. The data and the consumers are an important part of it. But by really going deep, that is what in my mind is defensible, right? Like if you build something that's a very thin layer on top of an open source AI model, and like all you have is like 5 custom prompts, that's probably not super defensible. But if you truly understand your users and your domain and you solve problems for them, somebody else can have the AI and the technology, but really that understanding of your users and understanding what their needs are and solving for that is like AI alone nobody will be able to just compete on that, right? Like so that's what we've learned with maps, really going deep, understanding a problem, and then using technology to solve it will make it very hard for others to compete with that.
What's a like Philip? What's a one case that you didn't anticipate? Like it was a surprise that this is something new and novel, and it was a surprising use case that we based on this asset that we've created, we can actually apply AI here in this new way. Has that ever happened like in the last couple of years?
My teams always surprise me. So I I'm very lucky to be surrounded by people that are a lot smarter than I am, so they figure out stuff and share that with me. So that's I'm constantly like amazed by the progress of like AI. I think so. The one thing, and it's not necessarily like a use case, but the one thing that really blew me away as an example in our map making was like it's like I think like 2 years ago, right? Like so we've tested our like image detection AI, which is detecting like stop signs where it's legal to drive and where it's not legal to drive and things like that. And then I'm always like very much going into details. So I ask people like, show me our images, show me the detections. And well, somebody like in our computer vision team like showed me like the detections and it said like, here's like a stop sign or don't turn right sign or something like that. I said like, that's wrong. There's nothing. And then the guy like zoomed in the series of images, zoomed like 2-3 images further, and then it was really there. So it's like, oh damn, the AI has like better vision than I do, right? Like so this was like for me this moment when I've seen that like a lot of our computer vision tasks, AI is now superhuman and like outperforming us. And that was like one of these moments where I said like, oh my god, this is like really cool, right? Like the AI sees stuff that I can't see. So I really like enjoyed that. And like similar many things now, I think we had like as now like ChatGPT and stuff like that was rolling out, I think we had a lot of these like, oh my God moments where I said like, oh, I didn't think that use case would be possible. Right. Like, so, I mean, I have like a bunch of like even like hobby projects where I'm just like playing with AI, where I'm all the time seeing like, wow, now you can like ask like ChatGPT, hey, what are the 10 most popular dishes in Singapore? And it comes up with like a reasonable thing that you can like use and things like that, right? Like, so I think the things that are possible now are quite amazing.
Mo, what are some of those OMG moments where you're like, oh, it surprised you that the capability or a use case presented itself that wow, like OMG, we can actually do this based on something you discovered.
Let me think. I'm trying to think of something recently. I think the image recognition and analysis, starting to see some of the initial APIs around that and what can be done there. There's a lot of content out there in image form. I think text summarization is like the money ball, so far. There's been a lot of history, a lot of work done on text. But to me right now, image, there's a lot of image content out there, and it would be really exciting, like OMG, to see what we can do to extract interesting suggestions, recommendations from that.
Oh, that's super interesting. Now let's kind of turn our eyes towards like building an organization, what it really takes to build a practice. But before I hop in there, I'd love for folks to think through, even if it's something that's technical or tactical, it's an opportunity to ask Philip and Mohammed, like for advice on something that you're building yourselves. I know just drop it here in the chat, and we'll come around and summarize that. And we actually have time for discussion in that regard. But let's think through scaling or building an organization. I think that once you move beyond like problem solution fit and interesting use cases, building a defensible idea that and establish and validate there is a market behind what you're building. Building an AI practice is different than building software. And the landscape, the services that are available to everyone, there are things that you can pull in. There's so many options now, models that you can either just tap through an API or bring in-house and customize. But what does it take? Help us think through what are some of the decisions and capabilities that you must build in-house for the problems that you are solving. And I know, Philip, that you have like purview over a massive organization. Talk us through kind of like what that, what does it really take to build and scale an AI practice, and what is it that most founders don't think about in the early days when they're still just focused on the use case itself that they need to think about as they're making plans to raise money or to actually think about what they, what capabilities that they need to recruit for in the future.
Yeah. No, so I think building an AI powered org, right, like is definitely a big undertaking if you want to really like scale it and make it work in a very general way. So give you like a sense, just talking about like our map organization, right? Like we talk about a few hundred people in tech, and then I think this is one thing that's commonly overlooked. We have several thousand people on the operations side that helped us like train those systems and like build the data sets, create those maps, right? Like so it and then you have obviously the infrastructure itself. I mean, a lot of us have seen the Nvidia stock go like skywards in the last few quarters, right? Like so the infrastructure that you build this on top is a significant investment, right? Like so what I would say, like a few things that I would advise anybody to think through as they're scaling is be very cognizant of your compute cost at scale, right? Like I see for many like AI orgs, it's right, like this is the old, like this is, I see the same challenge that happened in the early internet days. It's very easy to sell a dollar for 90 cents, right? So people need to be very cognizant that whatever use case they're creating, that the value that they're creating for users is higher than the cost they incur on running all of that, right? Like, so I think this is what people should really be mindful of, like just having like a ballpark number. If I run all these services for users, right? Like, so this is where I see like in the latest AI days where like people say like, oh, I use like GPT-4 for everything. But then like they say, oh, if I use GPT-4 for all these requests, then my cost is going to be X. And then they're, oh, maybe I need to like use like an open source model like Llama, but then the quality isn't that good, right? Like, so these kind of trade-offs are very, very important when building it, is to like think through when you're scaling this, is the cost that you'll be running sustainable at the long term? Having said that, I think we should also like, I mean, the technology will evolve super rapidly, right? Like, so the capabilities you see now, they will be 10 or 100 times cheaper in like a few years or something, right? Like, so that's also important. But I think thinking through cost for the models and so on, and for the infrastructure is super important. And then the second thing is really having a very strong like AI ops practice, right? Like people that, depending on what you're doing, that annotate the data set, right? Like that make sense of it, that train the systems, right? Like, so I think there's oftentimes you see that you need to have a few very strong data scientists, but you need to have also a lot of people being really good at like curating the data, right? Like, I mean, that's like, even like large orgs like OpenAI and so on, they have like hundreds or thousands of people who are like curating the data and so on. So I think that's really important as you scale up the org. And again, it's different for different use cases, but in many use cases, you will need a very strong data and AI ops practice as well. So that's like just a few advices in scaling these orgs.
We'll come back actually to that because I do have a couple of specific reflections and questions. But Mohammed, I know that Apple's very secretive about organization and things like that. But what can be said in terms of what are some of the things that you're thinking through yourselves, like as DesignPro takes off, what do you need to prepare for or think about in terms of preparing your organization to scale once you hit product market fit?
So of course we're right at the beginning. So Apple level is on the level of tens of millions of devices, and I do remember those days because there was definitely a lot of chaos because we had to go from a company as a startup that had to support 1 million users, which sounded a lot back then, but then you have to immediately make this transition to like 50 to 100 million users or devices. And so the team grew from one person. We had a head of scaling, and it had to go from one person to almost about 20 people in a very short amount of time. So that's what happened at Apple. Of course, at DesignPro now, we're dealing with just the beginning. And so as a founder, it's encouraging to see the last release of ChatGPT 4 Turbo, where the cost did go down, the speed did go up, and we're allowed to make a larger number of requests, right? So it looks like it's trending in the right direction for founders to be more friendly. And I alluded to image content earlier. We're dealing with text, but when you're starting with dealing with images, you have a lot more data. You got to handle a lot more. And hey, we're not even getting to video yet. So from a founder perspective, the way I just take it day by day, but from where I'm sitting right now, it looks like we're going in the right direction. At the moment, we're not having crazy costs, but of course, like Philipp said, we have to be very mindful, of the AI ops and how that's going to scale as we scale.
Reflecting back on, like, this is the early days, this is like 2015, 2016, when we actually built an AI practice at Caliber, my first company. So we had our team who built our fundamental model. We scraped the internet for job posts. We created our own skills graph, so on and so forth. It evolved. We didn't know what to call that team, so we called it just basic R&D. And they had 3 specific use cases to be able to recognize entities, like what is a skill versus a job description versus a seniority rank. And the second is to be able to understand which skills are and which domains those skills belong to, so we can produce recommendations for jobs. So the practice of building AI actually kind of happened in a bubble at first, because it was a different skill set. They weren't engineers. They really needed to focus on kind of building this model that kind of existed outside of the normal product delivery organization. And then what was interesting is we didn't know how to have this conversation between people who are building and refining the models and the people who are actually designing the feedback and responsible for prioritizing the roadmap. So just the organizations for a time kind of like went like this, right? And I had, again, nobody knew how to do this. I had to figure out how to bring it back together. But Philipp, maybe on the organizational front, like with a company with probably a really significant AI practice, like how do you organize that conversation between those that are looking after and building and refining your models, your AI itself, and machine learning, versus those that are building product? Like, how do those conversations and that planning happen?
So I would say 2 things to that. So first of all, since Grab is like significant scale, right? Like, so we have like infrastructure teams that build like the systems that people build on top. Those are like horizontal capabilities that power like everything, right? Like, so there's like a general, like a feedback loop system, a system that like processes insights, a data lake, all of these, right? Like those are all horizontal capabilities, and they really like interface mostly with the other teams when they need support, and not so much with like the specific problem. Like, so that's one. So it's really important to have like a bunch of people just create strong infrastructure for you that you use across everything. And then the other teams is we've actually made the choice to embed our data science teams in our what we call tech families, right? Like, so at Grab, we are organized in these teams like tech families that are tackling a problem space, right? Like, so let's say mobility would be a tech family, deliveries would be a tech family, maps, geo would be a tech family, right? Like, so those have basically the data scientists embedded in them so that they solve the problems together with the team, right? Like, so I'm a firm believer in what we call like empowered product development, where the people, like the product manager, the engineer, the data scientist, the designers, the analytics folks sit together in one team, and then they all solve a problem, right? Like, so the data scientist is very close in saying, like, in the example I gave earlier, right? Like, so we don't know, in Jakarta, we see there's lots of small, narrow side alleys. We don't know where they are. And then the data science and the engineers can figure out, okay, how can we write a computer vision model that detects these little streets, let's say either on road images, on satellite images, whatever they pick to solve that from. But the data scientists would know what are the problems they're solving, and they wouldn't create an abstract model. That's super important in my experience, that people creating these models know what problem they're solving, and that are deeply embedded into that, because otherwise it's super hard for them.
You know, the other pain point, as you're talking about infrastructure, and this is us again learning how to build an AI practice from scratch. We underestimated what is now called ML ops and the amount of expertise to actually get a model to run in production well. It took us quite a while to figure out and build that infrastructure to deploy a model in production and to get that going with you know the expectations for accuracy that we had seen in like the development environment. So you know what I'd like to kind of now like move on to, and what I'd love for you, I'll give you a few moments to think about it, is to ask you, think of a question that you'd like to ask about each other's either companies or practices, whether if it includes challenging each other. But overall, like before we get to that, I'd just love to, you know, for you just with a blank canvas here. Many of the folks here are building products. They're product managers or engineers. What are some of the ways, kind of switching over from like the product hat to the builder hat? What are some of the ways in which you feel that engineers and designers and product managers even can equip themselves to be relevant in the rapid pace at which productivity and co-pilots are evolving? Like Mo, I mean, you're in the space. How do you think about, how do you advise designers to stay relevant in the space where, you know, a lot of, you know, image generation and even interface creation can happen with a model?
Well, you know, we're already seeing AI being able to generate content, designs, right? And so I feel that if as a designer you're primarily, you know, in the you know, execution of Figma files, wireframes, designs, many people can do that, and AI is already starting to do that. I think the best way to equip yourself and to be resilient is to level up. You know, think about it that way. When I think of designers, I don't think of someone who's just creating a pretty, you know, image. I think of someone who's solving a problem. I think of someone who comes in with his or her taste. I think of someone who is prioritizing and making trade-offs, you know, on what to focus on, what not to focus on. I think of someone that has empathy, you know, and really understands the customer problem really well. I think of someone who has creativity. So I just named like a whole bunch of stuff, you know, a whole bunch of skill sets that, you know, AI hasn't taken over yet. And so I think it's not just for designers, it's for all of us, you know, including even myself, to level up, to think about more the softer skills or the higher order skills, decision-making, problem solving, and to get better at those, you know.
And like you have, I mean, DesignPro right now is a Figma plugin. How do you see kind of this ecosystem of tools evolving? Like AI tooling, are they going to be embedded now into design software? Like what are you skating to? What are you anticipating for how AI gets embedded in design workflows?
In design workflows, yeah. I mean, we're you know, in this vertical space of not generating the design for you. I mean, I think there are tools out there that do it, and you know, designers can generate designs on their own, but it's more of the part of what should I do? You know, what product should I build? That for me as a product manager was the number one question. So the first step, I think, to doing that is creating a task manager product that's handcrafted that designers would actually use. And this comes from experience as a product manager where, you know, I can work with engineers really easily because there's Jira, there's a lot of visibility on tasks, and engineers are very comfortable, you know, with issue tracking, and Jira has evolved, you know, from issue tracking. But when I think of designers, I actually struggled as a founder working with several designers because there is no home for what a designer's working on, right now. 30% of the designers, that we spoke to and work with don't use any form of task management. So I ran into a problem where, a few days would go by and I would go back to my designer and realize, oh no, they're working on the wrong thing. Things have changed since then. So that didn't work. Then I also work with designers that adopted Notion and spreadsheets. And while that's a step forwards and I have some visibility, very soon that task list becomes outdated, And so that didn't work too, because I ended up actually managing them and becoming the project manager for them and updating their task. And then the last 30% designers, have to use Jira because, enterprises sign up with Jira and they have to, and they don't like using Jira. So when it comes to how designers work, I felt like there wasn't a home for them. And so that's why we created, DesignPro. It was actually a more selfish need of getting visibility on my own designers so that I know what's going on. And because things change so fast, especially when you're a startup, 0 to 1, product market fit, you're zigzagging, right? You're changing, course correcting. And so you want to make sure you're really aligned super well with your designer, and having a way for them to be aligned with the rest of the product team, marketing team, engineering team, visibility is at least the first problem to solve. I think there are other problems as well, if we want to think further, but that is at least kind of the problem we're trying to solve now.
Yeah, the alignment between design and the rest. That's interesting. And it's interesting also that you're deriving the context from their normal interactions, the comments, the Slack, and
even eventually their designs, their actual design work as well. Yeah.
Wow, that kind of scares me a little bit.
Well, that's why it's a recommendation. It's all part of a co-pilot. It's a co-pilot. So hopefully it helps you become a better designer. Yeah.
And Philipp, you and I were speaking about this the other day in terms of equipping product builders, engineers with co-pilots and productivity. But for those, there are quite a few actually engineers in the room right now, not just for AI, but what do you advise engineers now, or your engineering leaders, to prepare kind of, your technical teams to use, co-pilots, how not to use them? How do you advise kind of both from an individual level or even organizational level, the adoption of specifically engineering co-pilots?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things. One thing in this big paradigm shifts as we're seeing now, on individual level, it's just super important to stay curious and try things. Right? So what I advise everybody, and that's even outside of the company, right? So because there's a lot of privacy and data consideration where you don't want to feed your confidential company data into something. But what I'm advising people is just use it in their personal life, right? Go and let I don't know, ChatGPT plan a holiday for you. Let it solve some interesting hobby pet project that you ever wanted to code and stuff like that, right? So I think the important thing is, right, as we're that's what I'm doing. I'm coding on the weekend. I'm coding a bunch of projects with all kinds of AI assisted kind of things, right? I have AI help me create the images for that website. I have AI help me with the coding for that. And that's basically how I'm learning how I can use it, and I'm pushing myself to use it to really see and learn for myself, right? This big paradigm shifts happened a few times in my lifetime, right? It happened with the early web. It happened with architectures. It happened with mobile, right? Where you see that suddenly now it's mobile is becoming a thing, right? And every time you need to kind of retrain your brain by trying those things. So that's what I advise everybody on an individual level. Just stay curious and try these things. You'll be amazed what you can do. And the best way is I'm really a firm believer by learning by doing, right? So that's one thing. And people should be mindful right? Like, I mean, there's been like a bunch of cases where engineers at some companies upload like all the corporate knowledge into like ChatGPT, and then suddenly it happens at the training set and then everybody knows it, right? Like, I think people should be mindful, but there's areas with low risk where you can just like do that, which is like your personal data and stuff like that, right? Like, it's you're in control, not the company. So I think that's one I really advise everybody to do that. At a company level, I do think that making the right tools, right, like be it like GitHub Copilot, be it like Stable Diffusion for designers or Midjourney and things like that available. I do think that's becoming more and more part of the tool chain of the designer, developer, product manager, right? Like, so I do think like making those things available, and like I think I really like the analogy that like Steve Jobs used, right? Like that computers are a bicycle for the mind. And I think like if computers are a bicycle, like the AI copilots that we're having, they're like a jet plane or something like that. So I think we're really like at this level where people with the right tools, they can be so much more productive and create so much more amazing things. So I think it's really up to organizations to make those things available for people.
So, what I'd like everyone to drop in the chat is one thing that you're a little ashamed that you use GPT to do. while you all are dropping that, I'll start. I actually used ChatGPT to write board resolutions for for adopting like routine things, just because it's $100 for a lawyer to write a draft resolution for X, Y, or Z. But I have a policy background, so I can check to see if it's hallucinating or whatnot. But as we're kind of getting through that, like, I'd love like for you all to. I hope you came up with your question. So Mohammed, like, what's one thing that you want to ask Philipp about kind of how they think through AI, like how their thought process in building an organization? I think you've seen it in small scale and big scale, but what's one thing that you would want to ask Philipp, vice versa? Let's start with Mo.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've just been super curious about a potential assistant, with Grab. Of course, I don't know if you can talk about it, but I find myself using multiple Grab services. So Grab transportation, of course, sending packages, food. It's almost becoming, just part of my day-to-day life. I wake up, I got to order, groceries. I then have transportation. I got to go somewhere. The Grab is my home screen. So when we were at Siri, we thought of AI not just as something cool, but as an interface to many, many different applications. And that was one of the, I think, reasons why Apple saw value, is because at that point there were thousands of apps, on your iPhone, and you now had to go to every single one. But now you have a singular interface, to all of those in a way that's a lot more natural. I was just curious if, that's something on the road. I don't know if you can talk about it, but I've always been interested, in that concept for Grab.
Yeah, I love the question. Unfortunately, I really cannot talk about any like potential upcoming features. But I think in a what I can say, so outside of the context of Grab, is I do really believe that what you're saying, right? Like that AI and like chat and voice and language, natural language, is becoming a new interface for people like access like all kinds of services, right? Like, so the vision that you're outlining on a personal level, I strongly align with. And yeah, I think as said on the Grab side, unfortunately, I cannot comment on unreleased products. So,
yeah. But that is interesting though, Mo. Like, because like Siri kind of is one interface that kind of that interacted with thousands of applications, but Grab it's the super app, right? And it kind of consolidates all of the different. I mean, like at one point, I think I could buy insurance on Grab in the Philippines and order gifts. So it's consolidating. You have to go to one app, which can do a number of different things now. So it is a little different. Philip, what's your question for Mo?
I think the question that I have is, what is something for DesignPro that you would like AI to do, but you have seen existing systems aren't capable enough yet? Have you ever run in that problem that you say like, oh, damn, I'll need to wait for GPT-5 to be able to solve that because right now systems aren't good enough?
Um, quite a few things that I'm waiting for, so it's hard to pick one. But if I have to pick the one that I'm thinking of next, it is being able to not just analyze the comments and the conversation, around my work, but a little bit more of actually the Figma canvas, like actually having some understanding of what I'm trying to build. It could be as simple as a landing page, or it could be complex, like the Grab app, but AI that can get us some understanding of what I'm trying to build, and based on that can give me then tasks and recommendations that align towards my targets, my goals. So if it's a landing page, it should understand that I'm trying to convert users or leads into signups. It should understand that I should have very high clarity headlines that communicate the value. It should recommend to me, for example, right now my website doesn't have a video, just a screenshot, and I realize that my product doesn't work demo well if you don't show an actual video. So I would love the AI to be able to understand some of these things and give me recommendations based on a history of a lot of the landing pages that it's seen before. So again, this is maybe not something OpenAI would come up with, because landing pages, even though it's a big market, it's still a kind of a niche vertical. But I would love to have AI that really helps me align what I should be doing towards my objectives. And even though I'm fairly, got some experience in this space, there's always stuff that I still don't know or I'm not thinking about because I'm thinking about other things. So I can benefit, from this. Yeah.
Awesome. Here we have another startup idea. Great.
I guess that's another one there. Yeah.
Yeah. So interestingly, let's see what folks had said. Some people use obvious use case ChatGPT to write code, or CTO uses it. The way he actually uses ChatGPT is to, sometimes it would take like a day to do research, but now he can get to an 80% or 90% answer on research for whatever he's trying to troubleshoot for in his code. But his challenge is that he doesn't know how long it'll take to get that last 10%, because you don't know what the limitations are from ChatGPT. Others have written, made a PRD on ChatGPT. Thanks for admitting that, Julian. I don't know. I just noticed my team didn't answer this for use cases.
I also have a lot of embarrassing examples. So yeah, don't worry. I'm full of them.
Name one.
I probably write some WhatsApp messages from ChatGPT. And I think it's also because I think clarity is so important, especially when you're writing something short. Getting clarity is really important. So just passing it through ChatGPT to increase clarity, it helps me. Yeah.
Oh, it looks like Gabe has a similar process where it's jumbled thoughts. I've done that. Like, that's probably my most common use case, is like, simplify this paragraph. And then I'm being like, dang it. Philip, what's one thing that you use ChatGPT you're a little embarrassed by, but not really? It doesn't seem like you get embarrassed by much. So.
Holiday planning. So
I
think it is like excellent at planning. Like, I'm now planning my winter ski holidays, and ChatGPT is suggesting me what to do.
Okay, like actual establishments to go to, or like general like ideas of activities.
Like, I mean, general, like picking the nicest city, the nicest resorts and stuff like that. So it's pretty good at that. And you can like have a conversation, tell it what's important for you, and then it'll like suggest you like the right places. So it's like talking to a friend, right? Like, so it's pretty nice.
That's cool. Yeah, I have like I'm very meticulous about my travel planning, so I don't think I could trust someone. Armando uses it to avoid Stack Overflow, so research as well. Um, Taiwan trip planning, okay, that's amazing. As we kind of move towards like the last segment, um, you know, one thing that what is like kind of general, like broader advice, like if that you would give to somebody who's now, we're kind of coming through a tough time for startups. GPT is coming through, and like the whole GPT marketplace that's coming out. Um, so for folks who are, and like AI itself is now going to threaten like how people interact with products, can render certain work tasks, can automate that. So like speaking specifically to like to people who are trying to start companies in this environment, what are some of the things that you talked like that you would advise, whether it's cautions or just uh, broader like things that you would, or areas of opportunity that you think are uncovered by what's out there? Like what do you advise and tell startups right now? Philip, it sounds like you might have an idea or two.
Oh, definitely. I think it's a wonderful time for startups in AI. What I've seen over and over again in this big paradigm shift, startup have a huge advantage that they tend to be very, very fast and much more agile and nimble than like big corporations. And then things where like, I mean, in AI, like every week you get like this, oh my God, there's a new discovery, right? Like subscribe to this AI newsletter. So the weekend I like catch up on all of them. So like, oh my God, that's a discovery in this week. I mean, even the last few weeks, like outside of the open AI drama, there was also like, they had like their developer day where they launched whole new
Yeah.
capabilities, and Mo alluded to that, right? Like their speed increased, their cost, like they increased the speed by roughly 3x and cut the cost by 50%, right? Like, I mean, that's for a startup that's betting on those APIs. It's a quite big change, right? Like it's very rare that your supplier improves performance by 3x and at the same time reduces like cost by 2x, right? Like I don't know that a car company ever like made their cars like 3 times faster and half the cost in a matter of like weeks and weeks, right? Like, so that's amazing. So what I would say for founders of startups is like the speed that you have to adopt things is really your superpower. And the other thing is, right, like you're generally as a startup, you can take bigger risks and bets, right? Like as a large company, if you adopt something, you obviously risk your existing business, right? I said like, oh, is there going to be like a data breach? Is there this and that problem, right? Like, so generally you tend to be a bit more cautious. At the startup, you can be a bit more risk taking and trying things, right? Like, so, and I've seen this myself at my startup, right? Like, so my last startup was a navigation company, and that just happened in the, like when mobile became a thing, right? Like this is the very early days of the iPhone. And like we were in navigation, right? Like, and there used to be established navigation players who have done this like 10, 20 years, right? Like they used to be like big companies, but they were not able to like build a mobile phone first navigation as quickly. And that's what allowed us to like thrive and do pretty well. And the same thing is what I think we'll see right now, that like many startups have the opportunity to really leverage these tools and the technology a lot faster than big companies, right? Like, so that's what I would advise founders to really use this nimbleness and speed as an advantage to really build things that and then take some risks.
That's awesome. That so speed is kind of your superpower, and just to take bigger risks right now. Um, Mo, what do you advise? I'm sure you talked to a number of founders who are in similar space, probably some folks from On Deck. What are you? What's the advice that you give yourself and to others that are trying to build in this environment?
Yeah. So I think we know there's a lot of AI tools out there. A lot of people are trying to build AI, and so what I think about is how do I actually build a business around AI? How do I think about AI in terms of value? Because I still believe the fundamentals of building a product and even a business is delivering incredible value, not just adding AI for the sake of it. So I think of value in sort of three levels related to AI. Level one is saving time, right? So we talked about text summarization. It can do it in seconds. I mean, incredible amount of time saved. That time saved can correspond to saving in an employee's time. So if an employee is spending, a couple of hours a week, writing a PRD, and you can summarize or generate that PRD in 1 hour or less, you save 2 hours worth of their time. However, I think you can take that a bit further. And this was a conversation I was having with someone related to agencies. So if you save an agency time, this is like a design agency or a marketing agency, it's a time saved of their employee, but it's also what can you do with that time? What can you help enable that agency to do with that time? So the example that I was told is that if the agency can save some time, but then is able to deliver 3 concepts, instead of 1 concept, the value that the AI is giving is not just the time saved. It's actually the fact that now the agency can charge for delivering 3 concepts. And so your margins and the attractiveness of the agency, the value is more than just that employee's time saved. So I would encourage thinking about following the path of time and what that time can be used to spend on that you're freeing up. And that is really the value, right, of AI. But that's only level 1. I think there's also level 2, which is thinking about AI in terms of relationships. So we all have relationships. For example, you can have a tutor, you can have a coach, a co-pilot. Co-pilot in a way is a bit of a relationship. And these relationships are really valuable. When I was a student, I paid a lot of money for a tutor. Even as a product manager, I had coaches, pay a lot for a coach. So if we think about AI as not necessarily replacing these people, but, having a relationship such as a tutor on your side, a coach, there may be other relationships. That's incredible value that, AI can provide that you can really build a business around. And then the level 3, the last one, is really around decision-making. I do feel that AI can be much better and has potential to help humans make better decisions on where to allocate capital. And a Harvard Business Review study came out with stats that 48 trillion is spent on projects, but only 35% of those projects succeed. So humans are deciding to create projects that end up not really leading anywhere. What if AI can help you make better decisions so you know where to allocate your capital? We're talking now, in this case, if you just increase that 35% by 10% to 45%, we're talking trillions, in increase in value. So these are 3 areas I think are really exciting. I think we're still at level 1, broadly speaking, but we have a lot more to go.
I was speaking to an investor in Singapore this last week, and he said, "Yeah, we're trying to build tooling that allows us to synthesize due diligence information very quickly." And I was like, "Oh, so your analysts can finally sleep more at night?" He said, "No, it's more so that instead of doing 2 deals a day, they can do 4." And I was like, "Welcome to Singapore." It's really interesting. So that's a really interesting model. Level 1 is productivity. 2 is deepening relationships, and 3 is making decisions. So I think that overall, and it's perhaps a parting question or conversation. One of the things that I realized as we gathered in Singapore, the folks who made it out to dinner, the folks who are on this chat, this thread right now, or this live stream, and just the 3 of us here, is that knowing both of you personally and having spent a significant amount of time picking your brain, being vulnerable with you and getting your advice, is that people's relationships and navigating, like, the relationships that we can cultivate and develop to solve hard problems, that is the superpower. Speed maybe for startups and business, but the fact that I have you, Mo, as a sounding board, and you, Philip, on the moments when he can share a WhatsApp thread to help me think through problems, navigate opportunities, and to be able to kind of make those connections. Like you said, Philip, the market is shifting. There's a paradigm shift, how products get built, how people interact with them, and how the economy, frankly, is going to function. It's a paradigm shift right now. And I think the kinds of relationships that we have and a common commitment to helping each other, whether if it's materially through an introduction, feedback, or just encouragement, I think is super valuable, especially because it's a high anxiety moment economically, and in terms of not people not knowing what what the what the new paradigm is going to settle into. Right. So maybe Mo, I'd love for you to kind of just talk about how do you want to support people and how people can support you personally in this. I'm going to ask Philip the same thing for you in a bit.
Yeah. Well, I turned 40 recently and kind of went through a bit of a midlife crisis, thinking about what do I want to do for the rest of my life. And this was over COVID. And I just somehow got, invited to like speak to startups because they were going through a very difficult time. COVID was a difficult moment for many businesses. And I just started talking to them, coaching, helping them think through things in a different perspective. And I started getting more involved, in coaching and mentoring. So honestly, I'm here to help as a coach and as a mentor, because I would love to see people be able to create, better products out there and go through less pain and spend less wasted capital. I love, yes, I'm a bit of an Apple fanboy, and I'm not saying that we, all of us should build like Apple or create Apple, but I think if we can just take a bit of the pain, away of figuring things out, and if I can help, people build better products, or at least get a process in place so that they end up, building better products, that to me would be a great way to help, the community.
Awesome. Philip, what's something that you want to help others with, and ways in which folks you're looking for support in your own journey?
I mean, as you do, Dexter, I'm a strong believer in communities. Right? Like I've been very lucky to benefit from communities that they've built. Right? Like I mean, where I've been in Europe for a while, right? Like in the Berlin tech ecosystem, then in Romania, in Silicon Valley, now in Singapore. So one thing that I'm personally taking a lot of energy from is being surrounded by very smart people as yourself that have a great vision for the future, right? Like and that's what I really love, and that's what I think my personal commitment is really help foster such communities, right? Like so I helped in Romania, contribute to like set up and like do continue to go there every year to like support the tech ecosystem there, because I was very lucky to benefit a lot from it in my startup, having really good people. So I think for me it's all about building communities, sharing knowledge, sharing what I know. I really believe in this ethos that, like, I mean, in tech, it's really much more about sharing than competing with each other, right? Like, so I think we're really like, I couldn't have like learned everything that I learned if there wouldn't be people that have created open source software, that have like documented the things, that have like spent hours like creating tutorials and how-tos and YouTube videos, right? Like, and you find this, the amount of knowledge you find out there is just amazing. So I think that's kind of like my commitment to do a little bit also to support like creating these communities and sharing whatever I can. So I'm generally like happy to meet like founders and folks and help them wherever I can.
And how can we and folks in your communities support you where you are right now?
I think learning goes both ways. I think the peer review 360, concept is really about not just managers giving feedback and coaching, but the reverse. So it really goes both ways. Of course, the problems we're trying to solve are more around like the granular day-to-day, workflow of a designer or a product manager. How can we improve it? So that, getting feedback around that, improving, continually refining and improving our understanding of the workflow day to day would really help. That would be like one example of, coaching, right back for me.
Okay, and we'll work together to make sure that we can create spaces for that. Philipp, how about you personally?
I mean, always I love when folks give me feedback how we can make Grab better. So I think that's one thing I'm very passionate about, and I'm solving a lot of these problems for people when I meet every day. And I've become like a hobby Grab support agent where people like ping their issues to. So I do like learning about those. And the other thing is really just like, I mean, like anybody who is also like helping building an ecosystem, like as you do, Dexter, very, very much. That's where I take a lot of joy, and sort of other people do that, and then I can be part of these communities. That's what helps my development a lot as well.
And before I let you both go, I think what I want to say is that you've both have built transformative products that have transformed how people interact with each other and with their environment. I mean, it's such a rare thing to have like a conversation like this with people who've literally, your products are in the pockets of millions, if not billions of people, and solve problems on a daily basis. And here we are talking about like automation and how the world is now changing, how computers are doing more and algorithms are doing more. But at the end of the day, that it's people's relationships, our relationships with each other, that really matter. And I think that the that is what's going to lead us from what the current paradigm is and whatever may come on the other side of what AI does to the economy, to the workflows, that it's these relationships that will make it grounded, right? As you could see, just like at what happened at OpenAI, like that was a human story in this last week. I know actually quite a few people who work there, and it was really there was. It's not just about the tech or even the business interests. People are really just trying to figure out how to help each other navigate through that. So it's a privilege just to have an hour and a half with you. I think for those that are on the live stream and those that will distribute this to like afterwards, it's just been such a pleasure to hear from you, to learn from you, and I look forward to using DesignPro for our teams. And Philipp, I use your products every day. Like I'm probably actually gonna hop on to order dinner right after this. It's amazing.
Do let me know how it goes, Dexter. Hopefully everything is smooth.
Oh yeah, that's totally. Mohammed, you're about to say something?
I was just gonna say, if when I was at Apple, like people started complaining about all their Apple products, issues to me, even though I had nothing to do with it. So I was just gonna say, if your meal takes longer than 10 minutes to arrive, you know who to call.
It's Mo at DesignPro.
No.
Yeah. I look forward to like being able to gather again. I know that this format is sometimes not as conducive to conversations, I think, but I think Swarm is experimenting with ways to pull people together. For those of you who are following Swarm, we are going to be releasing beta soon, and we're enabling folks who are increasingly AI enabled to be able to find each other, learn from each other, and work on projects together. So for those of you who are builders, there's a lot to look forward to there. If you are founders or corporate innovators and you need help thinking through your AI strategy, solving a technical problem with your software or your design system, we are launching, and we have a robust community that can help you sort through that. So thank you all so much for joining us. We'll release you to your evenings. Have a good weekend. And Mo and Philip, it was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
All
both.
right.
Much
Thank you. This was
appreciated.
awesome.